Shaitanir Rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I greet you, my brothers and sisters, with the noble and universal greeting of peace, the greeting that has been used by the prophets and messengers of Almighty Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is our purpose to gather every Friday to remember our Creator, and I think those two words basically are the essence of the Quran. Remember Allah, worship Allah, become aware of Allah. And verily in the remembrance of Allah, hearts experience assurance. So the Quran tells us to remember Allah, and tells us that when we remember Allah, what is the result of it? What is the consequence of it? Assurance in our hearts. Verily in the remembrance of Allah, hearts experience assurance. The Quran tells us that those who remember Allah abundantly, for them there is success. You remember Allah, you experience security, you experience success. This is the value of remembering Allah. And the Quran tells us that we are all to remember Allah. And those who fail to remember Allah will not have a blessed life. They will have a depressed life. Those who fail to remember Allah. So it's not that we are going to fail in the future to remember Allah. Adam and Eve, they had an experience with Satan, and that's where it all began, where from that point onwards the children of Adam and Eve lived in a state of forgetfulness of Allah. And we have continued to live in a state of forgetfulness. So all of us are those who have forgotten. It's not that, we remember, but in the future we might forget. It's that we are human beings and we have forgotten Allah. And so the message of the Quran is to remember Allah, to worship Allah, to recognize His praiseworthiness, to praise Allah, to become Allah aware. That's the message of the Quran. And if you become Allah aware, you will be successful. You will no longer have a depressed life. You will experience security, assurance. So it's a great thing to remember Allah. To remember Allah is our priority. If you remember Allah, then you're bringing to Allah a purified heart. Because you're not in a state of forgetfulness. The more you are into forgetfulness, the more you remain having forgotten, and you don't know that you are in a state of forgetfulness. And the guidance is given us to remember Allah, and you're not interested. You're just reading the Quran in a language you don't understand, and you're not understanding its message. I read a verse recently, chapter 67. It says the importance of listening and reasoning. To listen and reason. Get what I mean? A lot of people they're not listening and they're not reasoning. When guidance has come to us, it's there for guidance. It's for our benefit. It's for no longer having a diseased heart. Remember, the Quran says about those who say they believe in Allah in the last day, but they don't. They only fool themselves. They lie to themselves thinking they lie to Allah. But they only lie to themselves. In their hearts is a disease. The disease is expanded. They are astray. And they are left to stray. You know what I mean? So, human beings have a disease in their heart. Having forgotten. There's insecurity. They there's all kinds of bad feelings in the heart. Threat, vulnerability, fear, shame, anger, hatred, worry, stress. Human beings who are unaware of Allah are living in a trance. We all have forgotten Allah, and we all are living in a trance. We all have made the world real. We think the world was always there. We are always here. This is what Satan said to Adam and Eve. Shall I show you a world that will not perish? But that doesn't exist. Only Allah, who has not created and not produced, is the one who will never perish. You get what I mean? Everything that Allah created as a creation will perish, will cease to be. That which came into creation will go out of creation. But people, with Adam and Eve, with Satan, the people, the consequence has been living in this world in a state of forgetfulness. And so we don't know that we have forgotten. And the Quran has come, guidance to humanity, to heal the diseases in the hearts of human beings. And its message is to remember Allah, that we have forgotten. And we are to return. We are to turn back. And the people are not heeding its message. They remain in a state of forgetfulness. They don't want to know that they have forgotten. They don't want to know that they are in a trance, a satanic trance. They don't want to know that they worship Satan. They don't want to know that their hearts are diseased because they're not really aware of Allah. They're not Allah aware. They're not security conscious. They don't want to be believers. They don't want to go beyond the fallen, forgotten state of the trance. They don't want to remember. So there's a lot of people in the world. They don't know they've forgotten. And they don't know that there is for them to remember. And a lot of them are not interested in anything, any guidance about remembering Allah. They're not interested. People have ideas from the state of having forgotten Allah, and they live from these ideas of this false self, this self that is satanic, that I can trust my own mind. There are many people who live from having forgotten Allah. They're not believers. They are not aware. They're not experiencing from beyond their false sense of self. They are still in their false sense of self. They've forgotten of Allah's self. They're having forgotten of Allah. They're still there. And they have ideas that there's no God. They're still in the forgotten self. And they have ideas that there's no God. So when guidance comes to them to tell them to remember God, they already have the ideas with Satan. But there's no God. There's no such thing as revelation. So they forgot God. They're sitting on the thrones of their own, they think they are God. They think they know. They haven't humbled themselves. They are arrogant and they think they know. And they think they know that there is no God. Those are their beliefs from having forgotten God. And they remain there. So there are people in the world, although Allah is merciful and has given these people, all of us, this creation, all of us who have forgotten Him, guidance to return, to remember. There are a lot of human beings who say from the forgotten of Allah's state, from having forgotten Allah, and they don't want to recognize that for them to remember Allah. They don't want to remember. They have beliefs that there's no God. So they can't be reached. Deaf, dumb and blind. You can't get through to them. Because they are arrogant. Because they're still worshipping Satan. Because they still have lived in a forgotten state, forgetting of Allah, and they're not aware of Allah, and they're not realizing they are not aware of Allah, and they are in the trance state with Satan, that they have these ideas that Satan suggests to them. They don't know that they are controlled by these ideas of their own mind, which is from a forgotten state where Satan keeps humanity, in check for his own purposes. The Quran tells us if you remember Allah, you'll be secure. You live with a secure, assured heart. Security is yours, you'll be a believer. Satan stands on the path and wants you to remain kafuran. You get what I mean? We are on the path. The believer is on the direct path. There is a path and it's a straight path. It's a direct path. It's not a path that is going everywhere but where we got to go. The straight path is a direct path. We are here for the purpose for what we are here, to remember God. We are here to return to God, our universal creator whom we call Almighty Allah. That's our purpose. But those who are in the forgotten state, those who don't know they don't know, and they believe they know, those that are ignorant, arrogant, superstitious, they think they know, so they will not receive the guidance of remembering Allah. They have no clue what it means to remember Allah. To live as a believer, they have no clue. And they will never have any clue because they live in denial of Allah. They live having forgotten. They live in a state of continuing to perpetuate the forgetfulness by their own arrogance. Then we spoke about the second type of people. They have beliefs about God, but it's not the actual awareness and experience of God consciousness. They are not really into being God aware. They're not really into haqq, truth. They're not really inclined to truth. They're not into security with Allah. They're not into being real believers, really remembering. And so they have ideas in the fallen state, in the forgotten state, having not remembered. They have ideas, their mind. They still think that they know. They think that their teachers know. They think that other people know. And they follow beliefs, satanically induced, satanically suggested ideas of God that are incorrect. Thinking, having conceptions of God, having beliefs about God. A man is God, his mother is God, Jesus is God, the mother of Jesus is God. There are these things, these idols, that if you believe this, if you believe that, if you do this, if you do that, if you follow like this, if you follow like that, and it's all amounting to religiosity, religious ideology, but no awareness of God. And that religious ideology is off track. It's off track. It is not based in truth of the one unique supreme presence beyond this world, because of whom this world is. It's not based in anywhere close to God. It's an idea. It's an association of partners. It's thinking that the created world has power, or that from the mind that is in error, having ideas about God that has power. So those people haven't remembered too. And they are not interested in remembering, because they're in a forgotten state. They've forgotten Allah, and the guidance to remember Allah they can't accept. They don't know what that is. They will not know what that is, because they have ideas from the fallen state. They have satanic ideas. They're worshipping Satan. They have beliefs about God that's not God. They are mushriks. Until they humble themselves, until they listen, and until they reason, they will not really benefit from truth, from guidance. They will not acknowledge guidance. Then there are the people from which we come from, the people we're very familiar with. We live with them, we interact with them, the hypocrites. They say they believe in Allah in the last day, but they don't believe. They fool themselves thinking they fool Allah, but they only fool themselves. In their hearts is a disease. They are astray, they are left astray, the disease is expanded. They may stand in prayer, but their hearts lack the smallest of kindnesses. They say they're believers, but they shouldn't say that they are believers, for faith has not entered into their heart. They may be submissive in religion, but that too is not even so. They say they're into halal and tayyib, but they're not really into tayyib, they're really into halal, picking and choosing from the Quran. They're not interested in the guidance of the Quran. They're living with some kind of religious identity of a Muslim, but not real Muslim. They are not one inclining to truth. They just have an identity of their forefathers and what they told, some beliefs about Allah. They're not aware of Allah. They're not aware of the Quran. They have beliefs about the Quran. They're not aware of the Prophet. They just, keep beards and dress a certain way. But they're not aware of the greatness of Allah. They don't remember Allah. If they remembered, they'd be believers, faith would be in their hearts. They don't live with awareness of the Prophet and Amal and how he conducted himself. They're not aware of the message of the Quran that guides us to Allah. They're not interested in really listening. They're hearing, but they're not listening. And they're definitely not reasoning. There are those people. They're still in the forgotten state. But they really believe. They know Allah, they know the Quran, they know the Prophet, they know Islam. They really believe, they know the pillars of Islam, they're doing all these rituals and all that. If you listen to my lectures from years gone by and from recent years gone by and from last year, you'll understand that this is from India, the Hindu ways of gurus and pandits have continued, and people are still there culturally. They want to live like that, live like that. That's how they want to live. I had to accept it. They're not interested in the Quran and its message. They want to read the Quran in a language they don't understand, and they don't want to benefit from it. They don't want to purify their hearts. They definitely don't want to remember Allah. They want to do prayers and follow their pandits and, gurus. Allah says it's got nothing to do with us, how others relate to Him. It's got to do with Him. He will show them where they differed, where they were in error. He will show us where we are in error. Fortunately for those of us who actually believe in Allah, who want to remember Allah, who want to draw closer, who want to accept the mission, why we are here, the mission. The mission. What the reason is for our being here. What the reason is for our being here. Those of us who want to know what our priority is, to remember Allah, that we are in a forgotten state, and we want to remember Allah. We want to go beyond this trance of failure to submit, to live in a state of ignorance, superstition, arrogance. We really want guidance. So there are those of us who have sincerely in our hearts chosen to accept guidance, that we are here to live with Iman in our hearts, to worship Allah, to remember Allah, to bring to Allah a purified heart, to no longer be insecure, to no longer live from separation, to no longer live thinking we know, to no longer live from arrogance and entitlement, to humble ourselves, to be appreciatively accepting, to see the error of our ways. There's some of us who want to accomplish the mission that we are here for, to remember God, to spiritually express. If we don't spiritually express, we will experience spiritual depress, being spiritually depressed. We will not know spiritual well-being. We will not have a heart that is assured and reassured and ensured of our good in this world and the world beyond. We will live without patience. We will live without peace. Those of us who accept guidance, we no longer worry. Those of us who have been guided to claiming the protection, the refuge with Allah, we know that's for us to apply ourselves. We know what the path is. And we're on the path. I have been on the path. I got on the path. I've been stabilized on the path. I am further along the way. I'm not saying this to impress you or to make you follow me. I'm only saying it because it's a fact. I'm only saying it because I'm grateful that I'm fulfilling my mission. I'm a winner in this world through my death and beyond. I'm no longer insecure, living as a spiritual beggar. I'm a spiritual believer. I'm secure. My heart is no longer diseased with fear, worry, guilt, shame, unworthiness, threat, vulnerability. I no longer behave the way I did previously. I now know that God is enough for me, sufficient for me, adequate for me. I'm now God conscious and security consciousness. I have Iman in my heart. I'm living with greater levels of security. I'm living as an outstanding human being compared to who I was. How I was and how I lived, and how I was showing up with Allah as a child. Now I'm showing up with Allah as an adult. I'm actually aware of Allah. And I'm experiencing assurance in my heart. Verily, it is only in the remembrance of Allah that hearts experience assurance. And as I remember Allah more and more abundantly, I experience myself being more and more successful in so many different ways. And so, what I'm sharing with you is that there is a path. There's a direct path. But you must get onto it. And you must study. You must listen and reason. You got to be actively involved in bringing to Allah a purified heart, in remembering Allah. So I want to share this with you in 3 phases. How I recognize my own adventure into Iman, Amal, and a life tayyibun. It's like 3 phases, and I want to share that with you. For those of you who want to remember Allah, who want to actually experience assurance in your heart, who actually want to, aspire to, desire to fulfill your mission. To those of you who recognize there's a reason why you're here. It's not to have a good job. That's not your priority. I'm not saying don't have a good job. I'm just saying your reason for being here. Allah did not send you here to have a good job, to start a business. You can do those things. To get married, to have children. You can do those things. But that's not what you are sent here for. There's a lot of mushriks and munafiqs. They talk about God, but they don't remember God, and they don't know why they sent here, and they're not on the path, the direct path, the straight path, the vertical path, the ascending path, the path of healing their hearts. They're not interested in their hearts and healing their hearts. They're not interested in being God conscious, security conscious. They're not interested. They're interested in their religious ideas and their gurus and their pandits, and they're interested in their prayers, following what the pandits have told them. They're not interested in what Allah is telling them in the Quran. The pandits have told them, just read the Quran without understanding. Allah in the Quran says, listen and reason. This is a book for those who reflect and contemplate. This is a book for those of understanding. Allah is talking to us and telling us, be among those who are into understanding. Be interested in understanding. People are like, nah, I don't think I'm interested in this understanding. Just tell me what to do. All I want to understand is what to do. Well, what you got to understand is that you are to use your understanding. If it's for you to understand, that's what you got to understand. It's for you to understand. Allah gave you a mind and gave you akal, reason. You got to use that reasoning. When you worship Satan, the last thing you want to do is reason. You're just saying like a child, tell me what to believe, I'll believe it. Tell me what to do, I'll do it. And when you were a child, you were told what to believe, and you were told what to do, and as a grown-up person, you like that child, still believing what you were told to believe, and doing what you were told to do, but you don't want to reason. Quran is encouraging you to reason. The Quran is not for everybody. Now let me be very clear. The Quran is addressed to humanity. The Quran is addressed to everybody. But the Quran tells you who it is for, who its readers are. For those who reason, for those who contemplate, for those who choose to become aware. That's what the Quran is for. For those who believe in the unseen. You get what I mean? Most human beings, when you are in the fallen state, you don't know anything about the unseen, because all you do is you identify with your body and its senses. I can tell you, from before becoming a believer, what it was like, where many of you still live, where I once lived, thinking that what I am is a human being, and what I am is this body, and where I am is this world. And I didn't know that was what it feels like when you are in the forgotten of Allah state. I didn't realize. You see, when these people who have ideas that there's no God, atheists and agnostics, or those who say they believe in God, but they're polytheists or pluralists, or they say they believe in one God, but they don't really, they're not singularists, they're pluralists, they believe there's God and me. There's no Tawheed. You see, Tawheed is central in the life of a believer. If you don't know and understand the concept of Tawheed, you have not opened your heart to having belief in it. There's one thing I can tell you. If you don't experience Tawheed, that heart got no faith in it. So you got to ask yourself the question, who taught you about Tawheed? When did you learn about Tawheed? Oh, when I was a child, they taught me about Tawheed. Oh, as a child, I have a child's understanding of Tawheed. La ilaha illallah, there's no God but God. That's just an idea in your mind. That's not an awareness in your being. That's not experience in your heart. Get what I mean? So when everybody starts this journey, anybody who had a mother and father, including Abraham and the Prophet Muhammad, they had to submit. They had to submit. They were guided to submit, but they were truth inclined. They were truth inclined. So most people, they already think they know. They're not truth inclined. They're not Hanifa, inclining to truth. They're like, we already know. Our mind has told us, Satan has whispered to us from our state of forgetting God. We don't know God. We have no idea what Tawheed is, but we believe there's no God because our bodies can't see God and our minds tell us that there's no God. You see, this is how you know somebody is a non-believer, because their identity is misaligned. It's mistaken. They think what they are is a human body and a human mind. I'll explain to you why this is an error. Like you might be thinking, but that's what I am. Ashraf, what do you mean? I'm not a human body and I'm not a human mind. Well, if you believe that, you are not a believer. Because you don't know who you are. You don't know what you are. One of the things about being a believer is you know what you are and you know who you are. And you know where you are. And you know what's going on here. One of the things about being an actual believer is no longer being superstitious. It's no longer being ignorant. It's no longer being arrogant. that comes from unawareness and remaining unaware, and non-experiencing and remaining non-experiencing. See, verily in the remembrance of Allah, in the awareness of Allah, hearts experience security. Until then, if you are not aware of Allah, Tawheed, the oneness, the onlyness, the actuality of Allah, that Allah is alone the real, the first, the actual. If you're not aware of Allah as Allah really is, then you can have no experience of assurance. A believer who really is aware, their hearts are assured. This is what the Quran is telling us. And the Quran tells us that Allah places tranquility into the hearts of the believer as He expands them in Iman. Now if you I don't know, I think about Allah but I don't feel that assurance, I think about Allah and I don't feel that security. I think about Allah and I'm not feeling any tranquility and I'm not feeling my heart expanding in faith. The answer is you haven't yet submitted. Ibrahim alayhi salam had to submit, Abraham, the Prophet. Worthy of respect, Abraham. The Honorable Abraham. Peace be upon him. And the Prophet Muhammad, the most remarkable human being, a mercy unto mankind. The beloved of God. Abraham is a friend of God, right? A unique title. I mean, how does it get better than that? The friend of God. The Prophet was the beloved of God. How does it get better than that? In their own ways. They had to submit. Their hearts were diseased, they were purified. They received guidance. They submitted. Who are you and I? They guided Abraham guided his people, his family. They weren't interested, his children. Eventually, his nephew Lut alayhi salam, received guidance and went from the fallen forgetting of Allah to the remembering of Allah. Went from thinking he was a human being to realizing what he was, thinking he was in this world to realizing where he is and what's going on here. He awoke. He too awoke, and when Abraham had his children, he taught his children, and they said, do not die except having submitted. They knew what was the most important thing, that if you live and die without submitting, if you live and die without going beyond that false sense of I know, I believe, I. So you don't know who you are. I'm going to share with you over the next few sessions. I'm going to talk to you about these 3 phases of getting on the path. I can tell you about this because I've been through it. I went through from having no concept of Tawheed or just having some beliefs about believing what Tawheed is to actually experiencing Tawheed. If you believe in Allah, He'll guide your heart. If you really want guidance, you will recognize it and you will receive it. If you really want guidance, I would say to you to write it down. If you really want guidance, you will recognize and receive it. If you are one who is open to being guided, I was, and I am, open to being really guided. Not one who's open to being brainwashed. If you're open to being brainwashed, I suppose you will be brainwashed too. Many of us are unaware that as children we were susceptible to brainwashing. And we got brainwashed into ideas about God and to do prayers. But we did not, as children obviously, listen and reason. The Quran is not addressed to children. Get what I mean? It's addressed to all humanity. It's for the benefit of all humanity. But the Quran is not talking to 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, telling them to listen and to reason. Do you understand? is talking to grown-ups like you and I, who can read it. When you read it as a child in a language you don't understand, it's telling you about reasoning. You don't know what reasoning is as a child. As a child, you just tell your parents, tell me what's right. Tell me what to believe. Tell me what to do. I want to be a good boy. Children will tell you, when as children you're told, you'll go to hell if you do that. Don't do that. You get scared. As children you're told, go to heaven if you do this. You must do this. You just get scared. And you start behaving in a certain way. And people grew up feeling like those children and living as those children. And they still continue as those children. So when you talk to them and you tell them to listen, they're like, what are you talking about? That actively listen. Listen. Don't just hear. Listen. Participate in your engagement of what is being shared here. Relate. Respond. Reason. Use your reason. Reflect. Contemplate. They're like, what's all that? Just tell me what to believe. Tell me what to do. The Quran is guiding us to a higher level of awareness. It's talking to human beings that are grown up. The Prophet didn't say, bring your children and let's teach them madrasa. He never said that, as far as I know. He didn't say, let's leave all the grown-up people and the reasoning people and using their minds and reasoning, and let's focus on the children and teach the children to read the Quran and leave it at that. He didn't say that. But that's what's happening in the world today. Let's find the children and brainwash them while they're little, while they don't know how to reason. We'll just tell them, and they live their lives, the rest of their lives, without being able to reason and listen. This is why I have failed with people who went with me to university. I've reached out to so-called intelligent people, professional people. I tried to reason with them. I said to them, this is the situation in the country. This is the situation in the world. Will you see what I'm saying, that we can at least address this within ourselves and maybe support other people like us? Not a single one responded. The worst of the lot were those that were brainwashed when they were little. They are doing their prayers and following the gurus. They're the least inclined to listen to the message of the Quran. They worship their gurus, they worship the ideas of religion. They are Islamists in the sense of Islamism. They're not interested in listening and reasoning. They're terrified of listening to the Quran and reasoning because it's going to be different from the brainwashing that they received. They don't have that courage to stick out and listen to Allah and listen to the guidance of Allah. I'm not asking anybody to listen to me. I'm just saying, the Prophet said, if you know anything, share it with the people. The Quran says, keep reminding the believers for reminding benefits the believers. Keep reminding. Tell the people for reminding benefits the believers. So, very hard to find real believers, those who are wanting to remember Allah and experience assurance in their hearts. Very hard. I found it. I don't know if it was just bad luck. I couldn't find a single one of my people. I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't matter, because it's just for me to bring to Allah a purified heart. It's just for me to bring to Allah my purified heart. It's just for me to remember. It's not for me to make anybody else remember. It's not for me to ensure that you or anybody else's heart is purified. The Quran tells us, let those who believe, believe. Let those who disbelieve, disbelieve. I have chosen to believe, really believe, not just say I'm a believer. And so, I want to leave you, with the first part of this journey. And that is to recognize that there's a diseased heart. When you start off this journey, I recognized I was not feeling assured. I was not feeling tranquility in my heart. I wasn't feeling faith in my heart expanding. I wasn't really experiencing a relationship with Allah. I came to accept that I was not remembering Allah, and there was for me to remember Allah. And I wanted to remember Allah. I wanted to actually remember Allah, not have an idea of what it means to remember Allah and follow that idea of what I think it means to remember Allah or what somebody else thinks it means to remember Allah. I wanted to actually remember Allah. I actually wanted to be aware of Allah, to be security conscious. I wanted actually to heal the disease in my heart, to bring to Allah a sound heart. I didn't want to follow the gurus. I didn't want to follow the pundits. I didn't want to follow in this way of a brainwashed child just doing prayers and missing out on the Quran and its message, missing out on the Prophet, missing out on Allah, missing out on Islam. I didn't want to live like that any longer. I had to see where I was, come to terms with it. That could it be that I am among those who say they believe in Allah in the last day, but I don't believe in Allah in the last day, that I stand in prayer but my heart lacks the smallest of kindnesses, that my heart is diseased, that I'm just living, fooling myself and fooling other people, just being religious but having no awareness and experiencing of Allah and security with Allah. I had to speak that truth to myself. Now, not everybody wants to speak that truth. But until you speak that truth, that I am not on the path of Iman, Amal, and a life tayyibun, a life tayyibun and a blissful return, that I want to be on the path of Iman in my heart, not just say I believe, but don't believe, be a hypocrite. I want to be an actual believer. I want to live beyond this way that I am. I want to live beyond this way that I am. Guidance has come to me. And I don't want to live the way I am, I am looking and seeing the truth about how I've been living up until this point. Who and what I put first before Allah. How I made the world real, made me real, denied the reality that is Allah. How I've been living focused on what my body sees and my mind thinks, but not focusing on Allah who gave me a mind and gave me a body. I've been living without knowing what I really am and who I really am and where I really am and what's going on here. I want to know who I really am, what I really am, what's going on here, what my purpose is here. I really want to know. Whether not, I think I want to know. Look, if you don't want to know, it's fine. You don't have to believe. But just remember, the good news has come, and along with it is a caution that those who remember, they will no longer live a depressed life. Those who live with Iman in their hearts and Amal, those who live, really becoming aware of Allah and inspired by the Prophet and how he lived, living honorably with good conduct. For those of us who have Iman in our hearts and have Amal, live with honorable conduct, we will have a life tayyibun and a blissful return. You get what I mean? Now, people don't want to see that the way they're showing up with Allah is as a denier, associate, or a hypocrite. They don't want to know that there's another way of showing up with Allah as an actually aware human being. People don't want to see that they're not really living in a way that is beneficial to themselves, their bodies, their lives. Firstly, they don't know that Allah is the benefactor and Allah is enough for them. They're not feeling assured. And they're not feeling that there is another way for me to be with Allah and I want it. They don't know beyond what they are limited in their ideas and understanding. That's the phantom self, that's the ego, that's the satanic self, that there is another version of me, a believing version beyond how I'm living. They're living stuck and trapped in the current experience as being all there is. They don't know. There is beyond who they've been, how they've lived and what they've experienced. People don't know that they can live with Iman in their heart. There's a potential and possibility. They don't know that they can behave another way with themselves, their bodies and their lives. They don't want to see that they're not drawing closer to Allah and remaining closer to Allah. They don't want to see that their hearts are diseased. They don't want to see their behaviors is not honorable, not to themselves, their bodies and their life. They're not living as honorable human beings. They don't want to see that. And they don't want to see that they're not living a life that is tayyibun, giving and receiving with the right people, having things in life, living naturally. People don't want to see that they're living either deprived or indulged or attached to the things of this world, controlled by people, things. They don't want to see they lost and made valuable that which Allah created to have value to us. They've made it valuable. They don't know that only Allah is the one alone valuable, and what Allah created has value to us but is not as valuable as Allah is to us. They don't want to know. So the first phase is phase 0, where you start realizing, I am in a state of forgetfulness, and there is a option to remember. And that's when you realize who Allah is to you. Allah is the one who saw humanity in its pitiful and pathetic state of disbelief and decided to send out a rope to us, guidance. Allah is our merciful Creator who, in spite of and despite Adam and Eve's disobedience, insistence on having a covenant with Satan rather than with Allah, Allah is merciful and forgiving. Allah is our merciful Creator who saw us in the darkness and sees us in the darkness and still is merciful enough to extend the guidance to us. That is who Allah is. Who are you? You are the one who is astray with a diseased heart. That's who you are. I came to realize who Allah is and who I am and where I am and what's going on here. It's all from the Quran. I'm making nothing up from my own mind. I am a person who has forgotten Allah, who lives among other people who have forgotten Allah. Allah, the Merciful, has sent us guidance through prophets and messengers, revelators, and the revelations. And there is Allah who is concerned about us, who cares for us enough, who's merciful, who knows that we are completely lost in the darkness, but yet is merciful enough to send us the rope, His revelation, to send us His guidance. So who am I? I'm a human being who has been informed. I have accepted truth that I am here to remember. And I have Allah who has guided me to claim refuge with Him. That Allah is the merciful and compassionate. Could have left me to be in a state of haven't remembered. I could have lived and died without submission. I could have lived and died in a trance without being a believer, without experiencing Allah consciousness, without security, without iman, without selffulness, without amal, without satisfaction, without tayyibun. I could have lived and died with it. Do you know who I am? I'm the one that Allah has sent guidance to. You are the one to whom Allah has sent guidance to. We are the people who have the Quran in our own homes. On our phones we can Google it. We are the people to whom guidance has come. We are the loved creation of Allah, for He found us in the darkness and has given us guidance. That's who I am. I know who I am. I know who Allah is. If you don't know that where you are is here, and what's going on here is you living without faith. You're living without iman, you're living without amal, you're living without it, and you could have continued to live like that. But you might be thinking that all that matters is I get a job and I get paid. I got a good house. And I got a nice man who I can control, who does whatever I tell him to do, gives me money. I got this woman who pleases me, who I got control over her, whatever it is. Who needs to awaken? Who needs to remember Allah? I'll just be this nice guru worshipper, guru follower, pandit, turn to the pandit. I'll just do as I learnt as a child, my brainwashed prayers. Who needs to remember Allah? So there are people who don't want to hear anything about remembering Allah. They're very happy and comfortable in their forgotten states. They're very comfortable without Allah awareness. They're very comfortable with that diseased heart, and they are left to stray. And Allah expands that disease. Allah does not guide those people. See, they have no intention to be guided because they think they already know. They are ignorant. They are arrogant. I'm not looking down upon them or shaming them. I'm just telling you how they conduct themselves. You could have been one of those people. If you're here listening to this, I don't think you are one of those people. You might be saying, I'm interested in guidance. I'm interested in remembering Allah. But while you are here, you might be wanting to know about remembering Allah. But you might not actually want to remember Allah. So there's three types of people. Those who are not interested in remembering Allah and not hearing anything about remembering Allah. They think they got it all together. They fool themselves at best. Then there are people who say, look, we want to be guided. And so they want to hear about remembering Allah. And so they hear about remembering Allah. But they don't really want to remember Allah. They want to continue in a state of forgetting Allah, but they want to hear about it. And they might be hearing about it, but they're not listening. And they're not relating, they're not responding, they're not reasoning. That's the second group. To know about remembering Allah is not the same thing as actually remembering Allah. The third group actually remembers Allah. Shukr to Allah who has guided me, has guided us all. And shukr to Allah that I have been among those who've chosen guidance and value guidance. It's either you want to remain the same in your limited views and rigid identity, fixed personality, or you want to wake up and know what you really are and what's going on here. And live and die as a winner, recognizing where you are in error and correcting it while you're here. I have every reason to be happy in every moment of my life. Whether I got a good job or not, whether I have a partner that I can control or not, or whether that, whatever. I have every reason to rejoice. You know why? Because I am one who has received guidance. I know why I'm here. I have gotten onto the path. I have walked the path and I'm stable along the path. And you know what? I'm steadily expanding and running on the path. First I was crawling. Then I got up and I started walking. Now I'm beginning to run on the path. I live and die aware that I am humble. And what it means to be humble, become aware of it. Allah guided me and I am humble, and I humble myself every day. And I'm applying myself. I can see that I am progressing. This is not some mystified idea that you have in your mind. You will know if you are open to guidance. You will know if you receive guidance. You will know if you apply guidance. You will feel the benefit of it, because when you remember Allah, your heart experiences assurance. I feel assured, I feel reassured, at least a few times a day. And I feel that my good in this world through my death and beyond is ensured by God. I have Iman in my heart. And you can believe what you want and you don't have to believe it. It doesn't matter. What matters is I open my heart to Iman and have Iman that benefits me in this world and the world beyond. It makes no difference to you. What would make a difference to you is if you really wanted to go beyond who you've been, how you lived, what you've experienced, if you really wanted to have an awareness of truth, of haqq, if you're inclining to truth, and if you accepted truth, and you saw that truth guided you beyond your errors, if you corrected, and if you were one who is living, correcting every day in the mercy of God, and benefiting yourself through that mercy, applying yourself with God, you too would know what I'm talking about. Shukr to Allah who has guided me. When you see me smiling, it's because I know that I have a reason to smile. And even if I'm unhappy about things in my life, you'll see me with spiritual joy in my heart, because my heart is purified. It's being more and more purified, because I'm asking Allah, I'm sincerely interested. Those of us who have that spiritual joy in our hearts, those of us who live with that spiritual optimism, we know we have reason to feel good now. We are the ones whose hearts are being purified. We are the ones who have received the guidance and applied the guidance. Shukr to Allah. All praise, glory and thanks is due to Allah Almighty. His choicest blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.